Am I the a-hole for telling my fiancé I would call off the engagement if he doesn't stop hanging out with my father because of what happened with my ex? I, 27F, have a complicated relationship with my dad, 55M. He wasn't a bad father, but he has been a terrible husband. Growing up, I constantly found my mother crying because my dad had cheated on her again. He would cheat, she would lash out, he would crack jokes to lighten the mood, which only made her angrier, and then, within days, they would be back to normal. Until she caught him cheating again. I resented my father for this, and I resented my mother as well for tolerating it for so long. After college, I moved back in with my parents while I figured out my finances. I met a guy I really liked, and he came over to my parents' house most of the time. He and my dad got close pretty quickly. They hung out a lot and went on fishing and camping trips together. I thought it was nice that my father and my boyfriend were getting along so well, until I overheard them one day talking about their latest adventure. From that conversation, I realized their trips weren't just about fishing or camping. They were picking up women together. Essentially, my dad was encouraging my boyfriend to cheat on me, just to be discreet about it. They both tried to deny it, but I wasn't fooled. I broke up with him immediately, and my relationship with my dad got even worse. I moved out a few months later and rarely visited after that. My apartment was only a 20-minute drive away from my parents' house, but I only visited a handful of times, mostly because of my mother. Now onto the current situation. I met my fiancé, 26M, a few months after my last relationship ended. We dated for a year and a half before he asked me to marry him. I had already introduced him to my parents, and they had met a couple more times after that. He knew about what happened with my ex and why my relationship with my father was strained. We got engaged a month ago, the week before Thanksgiving. When I told my mother, she begged us to come spend Thanksgiving weekend with them to celebrate. She used the fact that we had drifted apart so much as her reason, and my fiancé convinced me to agree. On the first night, after dinner, my dad invited my fiancé out onto the porch to drink beer and chat. My mom and I joined them. The conversation was mostly about their mutual love of football. After an hour or so, I got tired and wanted to go to sleep. My mom had already gone to bed. When I told my fiancé, he told me to go ahead and that he would be with me soon. I felt very uneasy about leaving them alone, but I didn't want my fiancé to feel like I was monitoring him. My fiancé accidentally woke me up when he finally came to bed in the middle of the night. When I asked him why he came in so late and what they had been talking about for so long, he replied, "Football, of course." I didn't press further. All weekend, they hung out constantly. My fiancé helped my dad with chores and ran errands with him. When I brought it up, he said he was just being polite. Fast forward to yesterday. My fiancé casually told me he would be going on a camping trip with a friend. This wasn't the first time he had gone camping since we got together, but I became suspicious because he got evasive when I asked who he was going with. When I pressed him, he finally admitted he was going with my dad. Apparently, in the weeks after Thanksgiving, they stayed in contact. They had even gone to watch a football game together without telling me, because my father said I would make a big deal out of it. I lost it and told him absolutely not. I reminded him of what happened with my ex. He said I was being paranoid, that my dad was cool to hang out with, and that he had never mentioned anything about women. He said my dad didn't force my ex to cheat, so I couldn't keep holding a grudge. That hurt deeply, especially since he refused to cancel the camping trip like I asked. So I told him he could either stop hanging out with my dad, or I would call off our engagement. He got upset and accused me of trying to control him. He said that the fact I thought my dad could influence him meant I didn't trust him. We have barely talked since then, and he keeps giving me the cold shoulder. I don't want to be the kind of woman who controls who her partner hangs out with, but I feel like I set a clear boundary from the very beginning regarding my dad, and he knows how much this hurts me. Sorry for the long post, but I felt the context was important. Am I the a-hole for giving him that ultimatum? Final update, thank you to everyone who commented on my original post. I read every single comment, but I couldn't reply because it felt like I was reading what I already knew deep down. I did not break up with my fiancé right away. Pathetic, I know. This is a man I had been with for almost 2 years, and we had never had any major fights before this. I wanted to wait and see if he would understand where I was coming from and choose to cut my father off on his own. 2 days later, he was still giving me the cold shoulder, despite my attempts to talk things out. I also forgot to mention in my original post that my fiancé said it wouldn't just be him and my dad on the trip, his friend would be there too, so I didn't have to worry. But I think that was beside the point. What finally shattered the bubble I was living in was a text message that came through his phone while he was in the shower. It was from my father, and it said, "Has she cracked yet?" I realized then that my fiancé had been giving me the cold shoulder to wear me down, and that he had no intention of canceling the trip with my dad. Something broke in me, but it wasn't anger. I took off my ring and placed it on the nightstand. When he came out of the shower, I calmly told him that I needed him out of my apartment by the end of the week. He again tried to argue that I was being unreasonable and that I was turning into a controlling woman. I told him I didn't want to control his life, which is exactly why I was asking him to leave. That way, he could be free to be friends with whoever he wanted. I told him I couldn't be with someone who didn't respect my boundaries and saw nothing wrong with associating with someone who had hurt me so deeply. His attitude changed very quickly. He said he would cancel the trip and stop talking to my dad if that would make me happy, and that he didn't want me to leave him. I'll admit I was tempted for a moment, but I stood my ground and told him I didn't want to be with him anymore. I then left the apartment and drove to my parents' house. Once there, my calm completely disappeared. I tore into my dad for being a piece of garbage human being, for constantly cheating on my mom and destroying my relationships, just like he had done before. I didn't expect any remorse, and he gave none. Everyone who commented that he does this to prove a point was right. My dad told me that if I expect to find a man who will be satisfied with just me forever, then I am living in a bubble. He said men are designed to want variety once in a while. I expected that response, so it didn't shock me. What truly broke me was my mother agreeing with him. She told me I would never find the perfect man because all men cheat, and that what matters is that you're the one he loves and comes home to at the end of the day. I had mentioned before that I resented my mom for putting up with so much from my father, but I had never looked at her with the disgust I felt in that moment. I calmly told her that wasn't true. She might have resigned herself to being with a piece of garbage, but I know I deserved better. I told my father I didn't care if he disowned me, removed me from his will, or whatever else. I wanted nothing to do with him ever again. I told my mother that I loved her, but until she found enough self-respect to leave my dad, I didn't want anything to do with her either. Then I left their house and drove to my best friend's place, where I completely fell apart. Sorry if this update feels choppy. I've lost two of the people I cared about most, and it hurts like hell. But I also know I have to put myself first for once, after all the garbage I've put up with. Like many of you suggested, my best friend also recommended therapy, and I plan to look into it. P.S. I know that legally I owe my ex-fiancé a month's notice, since he moved in with me 7 months ago, but I don't think I can stomach that. Hopefully, he'll leave within the week and not make things difficult. Until then, I'll be staying at my friend's house. Thank you all so much for your responses. It comforts me a little, even when I feel absolutely awful.